Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we'll be reading two pieces from Ideas and Opinions by Albert Einstein. The first piece is called On Receiving Knowledge, on Receiving the One World Award. And the blurb reads from an address at Carnegie Hall on April the 27th, 1948, and it was published in Out of My Later Years in New York in the New York Philosophical Library, 1950. I am greatly touched by the signal honor which you have wished to confer upon me. In the course of my long life, I have received from my fellow men far more recognition than I deserve, and I confess that my sense of shame has always outweighed my pleasure therein. But never on the previous occasion has the pain so far outweighed the pleasure as now. For all of us who are concerned for peace and the triumph of reason and justice must today be keenly aware how small an influence reason and honest good will exert upon the events of the political field. But however that may be, and whatever fate may have in store for us, yet we may rest assured that without the tireless efforts of those who are concerned with the welfare of humanity as a whole, the lot of mankind would be still worse than in fact it even now is. In this time of decisions so heavy with fate, what we must say to our fellow citizens seems above all to be this: where belief in the omnipotence of physical force gets the upper hand in political life, the force takes on a life of its own and proves stronger than the men who think to use force as a tool. The proposed militarism of the nation not only immediately threatens us with war, it will also slowly but surely destroy the democratic spirit and the dignity of the individual in our land. The assertion that events abroad force us to arm is wrong. We must combat it with all our strength. Actually, our own rearmament through the reaction of other nations to it will bring about that very situation on which it advocates its advocates seek to base their proposals. There is only one path to peace and security: the path of supranational organization. One-sided armament on a national basis only heightens the general uncertainty and confusion without being an effective protection. So yeah, Einstein again proposing that peace needs to be brought about perhaps by world government. Because if you just leave it to nations, he feels that inevitably they go to wanting to stockpile their weapons for what could be a disastrous effect. The next piece we're going to read is called A Message to Intellectuals. And the blurb reads, "From the message to the Peace Congress of Intellectuals at Wroclaw, never delivered but released to the press on August the 29th, 1948. We meet today as intellectuals and scholars of many nationalities with a deep and historic responsibility placed upon us. We have every reason to be grateful to our French and Polish colleagues whose initiative has assembled us here for a momentous objective to use the intelligence of wise men in promoting peace and security throughout the world. This is the age-old problem with which Plato, as one of the first, struggled so hard to apply reason and prudence to the solution of man's problems instead of yielding to atavist instincts and passions. By painful experience, we have learned that rational thinking does not suffice to solve the problems of our social life. Uh, Penetrating research and keen scientific work have often had tragic implications for mankind, producing on the one hand inventions which liberated man from exhausting physical labor, easier, making his life easier and richer, but on the other hand introducing a grave restlessness into his life, making him a slave to his technological environment, and, most catastrophic of all, creating the means for his own mass destruction. This indeed is a tragedy of overwhelming poignancy. However poignant that tragedy is, it is perhaps even more tragic that while mankind has produced many scholars so extremely successful in the field of science and technology, we have been for a long time so inefficient in finding adequate solutions to the many political conflicts and economic tensions which beset us. No doubt the antagonism of economic interests within and among nations is largely responsible to a great extent for the dangerous and threatening condition in the world today. Man has not succeeded in developing political and economic forms of organization which would guarantee the peaceful coexistence of the nations of the world. He has not succeeded in building the kind of system which would eliminate the possibility of war and banish forever the murderous instruments of mass destruction. We scientists, whose tragic destination has been to help in making the methods of annihilation more genuine and more effective, must consider it our solemn and transcendent duty to do all in our power in preventing these weapons from being used for the brutal purpose for which they were invented. What task could possibly be more important for us? What social aim could be closer to our hearts? That is why this Congress has such a vital mission. We are here to take counsel with each other. We must build spiritual and scientific bridges linking the nations of the world. We must overcome the horrible obstacles of national frontiers. In the smaller entities of community life, man has made some progress toward breaking down the antisocial sovereignties. This is true, for example, of life within cities and to a certain degree, even of society within individual states. If such communities' tradition and education have had a moderating influence and have brought about tolerable relations among the people living within these confines. But in relations among several states, complete anarchy still prevails. I do not believe that we have made any genuine advance in this area during the last few thousand years. All too frequently, conflicts among nations are still being decided by brutal power, by war. The unlimited desire for ever greater power seeks to become active and aggressive wherever and whenever the physical possibility offers itself. Throughout the ages, the state of anarchy in international affairs has inflicted indescribable suffering and destruction upon mankind. Again and again, it has depraved the development of men, their souls, and their well being. At times, it has almost annihilated whole areas. However, the desire of nations to be constantly prepared for warfare has, in addition, still other repercussions upon the lives of men. The power of every state over the citizens has grown steadily during the last few hundred years, no less in countries where the power of the state has been exercised wisely than to those where it has been used for brutal tyranny. The function of the state to maintain peaceful and ordered relations among and between its citizens has become increasingly complicated and extensive largely because of the concentration and centralization of the modern industrial apparatus. In order to protect its citizens from attacks from without, a modern state requires a formidable, expanding military establishment. In addition, the state considers it necessary to educate its citizens for the possibilities of war, and education not only corrupting to the soul and spirit of the young, but also adversely affecting the mentality of adults. No country can avoid this corruption. It pervades the citizenry even in countries which do not harbor outspoken aggressive tendencies. The state has thus become a modern idol whose suggestive power few men are able to escape. Education for war, however, is a delusion. The technological developments of the last few years have created a completely new military situation. However, horrible weapons have been invented capable of destroying in a few seconds huge masses of human beings and tremendous areas of territory. Since science has not yet found protection from these weapons, the modern state is no longer in a position to prepare adequately for the safety of its citizens. How then shall we be saved? Mankind has can only gain protection against the danger of imaginable unimaginable destruction and wanton annihilation if a supranational organization has alone the authority to produce and possess these weapons. It is unthinkable, however, that nations under existing conditions would hand over such authority to a supranational organization unless the organization would have the legal rights and duty to solve all of the conflicts which in the past have led to war. The functions of individual states would be to concentrate more or less upon international affairs in their relation with other states, they would deal only with issues and problems which are in no way conducive to endangering international security. Unfortunately, there are no indications that governments yet realize that the situation in which mankind finds itself makes the adoption of revolutionary measures a compelling necessity. Our situation is not comparable to anything in the past. It is impossible, therefore, to apply methods and measures which at an earlier age might have been sufficient. We must revolutionize our thinking, revolutionize our actions, and must force the courage to revolutionize relations among the nations of the world. Cliches of yesterday will no longer do today, and will no doubt be hopelessly out of date tomorrow. To bring this home to men all over the world in the most important and most fateful social function intellectuals have ever had to shoulder. Will they have enough courage to overcome their own national ties to the extent that is necessary to induce the peoples of the world to change their deep-rooted national traditions in a most radical fashion? A tremendous effort is indispensable. If it fails now, the supranational organization will be built later, and then it will have to be built upon the ruins of a large part of a now existing world. Let us hope that the abolition of the existing international anarchy will not need to be brought or need to be bought by a self-inflicted world catastrophe, the dimensions of which none of us can possibly imagine. The time is terribly short. We must act now if we are to act at all. So, yeah, Einstein, again, pushing for peace by having a world government. He's fearing that we will end up in a situation where the countries are so trying to prepare for war that they push each other into war. And he's like, we must form a nation, a world nation, in which there are no nationalities other than human. Because as long as we continue to bicker with weapons that can destroy mass amounts of people and territory, then a catastrophe will happen. But yeah, that'll be it for this episode. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next episode. Until then, later.